I think you're all familiar with Ed Tatro. He was here last night. He's an individual that's, obviously a long-time researcher, but I don't know if you folks know that he's also an expert in subliminal messages on music, plagiarism in music. He's wrote 38 short stories and mysteries. He is a kind of a Renaissance man. Would that be good, Ed? Good to say that? No?
Just the kid from the hood.
The kid from the hood. But let's bring Ed Tatro up here. He's got to talk about Jack Ruby and the new information he has on him. Let's get it started. Oh, while Ed's coming up, as soon as we get done, we're going to have a pizza out in the lobby I hope for everybody. I ordered 12 large pizzas, so we hopefully have enough food for everybody. We'll take a quick lunch and then get back at it this afternoon. Ed Tatro, here we go.
Okay, he lied. I want to talk about a little bit of a few of the things from last night, and if I get to Ruby, great. By popular demand, I've been asked to talk about a few things, and I want to add on to what Larry just said, because one of the common things I'm always saying is all roads lead to Texas. And you have all that New Orleans intelligence stuff and all these little guys down in the trenches. But the document he showed you linking Clay Shaw to Charles Cabell, that to me is the biggie, because there you go, right back to Texas, okay? I can tell you this, a law enforcement agent named Jack Revelle was asked by Earl Cabell, the mayor of Dallas, to escort him up to his brother's house the night of the assassination. And Jack Revelle has told people in Texas, when he got there, it was filled with military personnel celebrating the night away. And that's why that document's important. I thought I should throw that out to you. Now let me put my glasses on and grab my stuff here, and I want to, since he brought, you also have to laugh because CBS and the American Assassins is doing this a little bit, and who's the main character for the media? Rather. Well, I think maybe we should talk about Dan a little bit, okay? One other thing I mentioned last night, Robert Story, basically Leon Jaworski's best friend, was very close to Charles Cabell. And when Charles Cabell was picked by Allen Dulles to be the second head of the CIA, Robert Story wrote a letter to Allen Dulles, his buddy, saying, what a great pick. He's not only a great intelligence officer, but he's a great man. So it all fits together. Okay. Yeah, here we are. See if I can kill two birds with one stone here, trying to deal with two subjects. I got to get my Southwest thing at 210 around there today, 225. What a pain in the neck that Southwest is. And before I begin, as a tribute to Brian Edwards, is Brian here? Yeah. Okay. I didn't send him this. I have a cat. I had a cat years ago named Norma Bates, named after Norman Bates' mother, Norma Bates from Psycho, because she was something. Used to chase German shepherds out of the yard. And she was a tortoiseshell. Now, tortoiseshell, calicos are black and orange and white. Tortoiseshells are all black and orange, all mixed together, okay? And we had her for somewhere around 25 years. She was getting close to the Guinness record. And now we have another one, tortoiseshell. So we named her Minnie Bates. And I wrote this last week. So this is for Brian. Every day is Halloween. It's a fact, not a dream. Every day is Halloween for a descendant of the Psycho Scream. Every day is Halloween. Without my claws, I can make you scream. She doesn't have claws because the people who had her first said, oh no, we got a pit bull here. Every day is Halloween. See my green eyes as they gleam. Every day is Halloween. Is my bite one of love if it makes you scream? Every day is Halloween, a black and orange flowing scheme. Every day is Halloween, I am never a one-day theme. Every day is Halloween, I am exactly as I seem. Every day is Halloween, I am held in high esteem. Every day is Halloween, buried under quilts, silent and serene. Every day is Halloween, I am a majestic, nocturnal queen. Every day is Halloween, I am the tortoiseshell, feline supreme. Okay, what the hell? I was an English teacher. No. In fact, you know, what some people try to do to discredit me? Oh, he can't possibly know what he's talking about the Kennedy assassination because he was an English teacher. You can't know anything about the Kennedy assassination unless you're a history teacher. So, you know, that's the kind of fallacious crap they use on you. Okay. One other thing, well, since he brought up, we got that rather thing. Let me find that right off the bat. Just give me a second here, and didn't expect to do this. I didn't think I'd have time to do it, but I got to make time. It's down near the bottom. Okay. During the Watergate business, in August of 1973, rather on a radio program for CBS, put this out on the public. Lee Harvey Oswald, and remember, Dan Rather made a bunch of documentaries for CBS basically saying Oswald did it alone. I mean, he's a lone assassin guy, all right? And yet, in August of '73, he said on radio, Lee Harvey Oswald, the man who shot President Kennedy, did he ever know or have contact with E. Howard Hunt or Gordon Liddy or any of the others in that mysterious and dangerous crew convicted in the Watergate crime? Under normal circumstances and in normal times, these questions would not be asked. Unfortunately for all of us, the circumstances are not normal. These are not normal times. So here's a guy that's been saying Oswald's lone assassin. All of a sudden, in the middle of Watergate, did he know Hunt? Did he know Liddy? Well, it's kind of interesting because right after that, Jaworski, you know, he gets picked for a special prosecutor. And he contacts Rather, wants to see him in private. And they have a private meeting. We wouldn't know about it from Jaworski, but Rather put it in his autobiography. And he never gives you any specifics. But they had a meeting. And Jaworski said that I welcome your counsel, Dan. And Rather never mentioned the Gordon Liddy, E. Howard Hunt crap ever again. Just thought I'd throw that out there. So bring up Dan Rather. Okay. Now I'll get to some of the things I didn't finish. And this part, I guess, is for Casey, because he's the one that's been haunting me about it. I didn't, when I talked last night, I was talking about the fact that I linked Leon Jaworski to the RFK assassination because he obviously was pals with Grant Cooper, Sirhan's loser lawyer. But there was one other aspect to it because one of Leon Jaworski's best friends was Lyndon Johnson. And Lyndon Johnson, it's quoted in one of Caro's books. Lyndon Johnson, when he was asked about Robert Kennedy, he said, I'll cut his throat if it's the last thing I do. So those two men hated each other. And when he died, Lyndon Johnson was asking around, does Robert Kennedy deserve to be in the Arlington National Cemetery? People were shocked. But he wanted to keep him out of the Arlington National Cemetery. And this is right as he's dead. He also was running around the White House while Robert was dying, saying, "Is he dead? Is he dead yet? Is he dead?" And people were shocked by that. At the funeral, LBJ refused to sign the appropriations bill to pay for RFK's funeral. All right? He wanted to have the D.C. Stadium named after him, because Lyndon Johnson had wanted everything named after him, okay? Lucy Baines Johnson, Lyndon Baines Johnson, Little Beagle Johnson, you name it, he wanted it, okay? And what the officials at the time, the politicians at the time, they waited till Johnson was almost out of office and they named it after RFK, so he couldn't stop them, okay? So that's another thing there. And and also, as he was dying, Johnson was considering, Johnny Roselli had accused Robert Kennedy of being involved in the CIA mafia plots to kill Castro. and he was going to leak it to the press, that allegation, as he was dying to make him look bad in the papers during the time he was dying. It gives you an idea what kind of a scumbag this guy was. I've written a 150-page chapter on Lyndon Johnson, master of outrageous acts. I could go on for 3 hours about the stuff that man did and said. Amazing. And finally, the real kicker for the ending of this part of it is Hubert Humphrey was heartbroken, absolutely heartbroken, the vice president. And he set it up so the top-notch surgeon of brain injuries in Boston was going to get a private jet or a military jet to fly him to LA to see if he could save Robert Kennedy. Lyndon Johnson found out about it and canceled the flight. So you have to keep all that in mind when you, Leon Jaworski and Lyndon Johnson. And I mentioned one other thing about little Marina. And where's my little, here it is. I mentioned this yesterday to a couple of people, so I thought it was probably appropriate. I've only talked about this once before, and there's no video of it. The people who were running that messed up. Now, what I mentioned yesterday was that Marguerite could name all kinds of people who were implicated in the assassination. She knew what was going on to a great degree. And, you know, they painted her as a lunatic, just like you mentioned about your man there who's got some truth, and they discredit him in that. And that's what they have to do. And I talked to Marina about this on the phone one time. And Marina said to me, and I'm quoting her exactly, and they didn't get along after the assassination. I don't think they ever dealt with each other again, or very much. And Marina said to me on the phone, Marguerite was temperamental, but not stupid. Take it for what it's worth, okay? Now, with that in mind, and also in his chapter, Oswald bought the rifle. His palm print was on the rifle. Those were all lies. I wrote an extensive article in Garrison magazine, Lee Harvey Oswald's Unresolved Pile, which absolutely proves he never bought that rifle, okay? And the palm print was planted. So keep all that in mind. Now, let's see, what else do I want to do? I wanted to do this little thing here. One time I was on the phone with Marina, and she said, you know, people write to me because they want me to write back so they can sell my autograph on eBay. And I said, yeah, but who the hell knows who Marina Porter is? And she laughed. And Marina doesn't laugh very often. I don't think she's a very happy woman, given the life she's had to live. And when I said that, she laughed. And I said, now, if you signed something to somebody, Marina Nicolovana Oswald Porter, that might be worth a few bucks. And she laughed again. So about 6 months later, we're on the phone again. And I told her that I was speaking at Lancer. And they're making the speakers pay $50 to speak. Now, the people who are selling books, that's probably a good write-off. You know, if you sell 15 of your books or 20 of your books, $50 is nothing. But I wasn't selling anything, you know, so it was $50 out of my pocket. So I told her that. She said, that's terrible. She said, if you wouldn't be offended, I'm going to send you a check for $50 so you don't have to pay for it. I said, I would be offended. I don't want your money. And then I said it. As a matter of fact, if you sent me a check for $50, I'm going to keep the check. The check's worth a hell of a lot more than $50. She said, well, how do I thank you for everything that you've done? And I said, I'll tell you what, why don't you send me a thank you card and sign it, Marina Nicolovana Oswald Porter. Put one of my grandsons through college. And she said, I will. Now, the reason why I bring this up is because in Jaworski's second book of memoirs, he makes a big, you know, he thinks he can prove Oswald did it because the mother's a lunatic who thinks he's innocent, and the wife, you know, gave them information that meant he looked guilty. Yeah, well, it's a woman barely speaking English who you know, who's, you know, behind the 8 ball here, and he tries to exploit her. And so, you know, and now we know Marina doesn't think that way at all. Once she got her citizenship, and she's been pretty feisty in various different ways. So, April 5th, 2014, I get a thank you card in the mail. And I typed it up. And this is for Casey, because he hadn't seen this. To a good man, Ed Tatro, Before my departure from this life, I must express my gratitude for your contribution to my understanding of events of 1963 in Dallas. Your diligent work for many decades, very much appreciated. It made easier for me to face each November 22nd. Also, it's very comforting to have a friend in your corner when you need it. Thank you again. Sincerely, Marina Nikolovna Oswald Porter. And then in Russian, which I can't even make out, it was simply Marina Prusakova, but you'd never know what the hell it is because there's all kinds of weird Russian letters in here, you know. But at any rate, and that's part of when people say, you know, how does this still matter? And that's that part I was talking about, a sense of pride, you know. I won't break down here, but that's special, you know. Okay. Now, where do we go from there? I wanted to mention just a couple of things about Watergate because, I mean, I could go on for an hour here about that. But I did want to mention, let's see if I can swing these pages away. I asked Doug Caddy, E. Howard Hunt's first lawyer, you know, to give me his overview, and I will read that to you because I think that's significant. He wrote to me, and this is just recently, the fault lay with President Nixon. From early on in the case, he did not realize the dire peril that he was in. He appointed John Dean to coordinate the response to the emerging scandal. Dean did that for almost a year with no oversight from Nixon, Haldeman, and Ehrlichman. They foolishly trusted Dean, who in reality was first and foremost protecting himself. When everything started going south with James McCord's letter to Judge Sirica in March 1973, Dean was the first to run to the original Justice Department prosecutors to turn state's evidence and throw everyone else under the bus, including the president. Only then did Nixon wake up. And that's the guy that's on the ground floor. I think that's significant. Now, one other thing about Watergate, I mentioned it. Jaworski colluded with Sirica. And when James McCord, who got caught on purpose with the purpose of getting rid of Nixon, put the tape on the door wrong, and the other Watergate burglars took the hush money, they wanted more, but they took the original hush money and kept quiet. And it was McCord that wrote a 2-page letter to Sirica. And what did Sirica do? He read it in open court, and that did it. Boom! The whole world wanted Nixon's tail. Okay? And I just want to mention one other thing about it, and that is John Dean lied about this, and and they had him dead. Archibald Cox had him dead. Oh, by the way, some of you might remember there were bumper stickers after Archibald Cox was fired. Impeach the Cox sacker. Okay, didn't want to leave that out. Okay, John Dean had possession of notebooks of E. Howard Hunt's. Who the hell knows what was in those? And he shredded them. And now you find out on his deathbed, whether he's telling the truth or not, who knows? Like Billy Saul, broken clock, right twice a day. But he says, Lyndon Johnson, Cord Meyer, all down the line, all those secret CIA guys, and with Lyndon Johnson on top, killed Kennedy. Is that what was in those notebooks? Who knows? But Dean got rid of them. And I'll say one other thing, and in the world of, polarization that we have today, you have people who love Trump, you have people who hate Trump, and one thing I object to is I object to having John Dean go on MSNBC crapping on Trump. There are plenty of other people who could go on TV who are experienced, who can do that. Don't have a convicted felon, being your star speaker. And I say that from an objective point of view without even giving my opinion of the state we are in, because I don't want any crosses burned on my lawn. Okay. Let me see. What else do I want to get in here? Yeah, I should do that. Let me swing that. I promised Casey I would talk about our friend, Mr. Segretti. And so if you just let me, I got a million pages of stuff here. The key thing with Jaworski is all of the crimes. He got Nixon. That was his job. He finished the job that McCord started, but he didn't pursue any of the other crimes, and he didn't pursue the ITT crime involving $400,000. ITT gave $400,000 to the Nixon campaign so they could have their convention in, was it San Diego or something, and that was never involved in. Nixon's people, before Ford took over, Nixon's people were destroying, burning in bags, hundreds and hundreds of pages of documents. And one legitimate guy in the Ford administration told Ford, you're going to be burned with this if you don't stop this. So lots of stuff was saved. Reels and reels of tapes were saved. Nixon wanted it all brought to San Clemente. Oh, by the way, that was another crime. He spent $10 million on improving San Clemente for security reasons. Right. Okay. We talked about, a number of things. One of them is the George Wallace shooting. And the thing was that the polls were showing that Wallace was winning enough primaries and pulling enough votes that Nixon was, no matter who the Democratic nominee was, it was going to be a tight race. It was like 50-50 because he was pulling like 13% of the votes. So he was dangerous to him. I wrote a poem that's in one of the Garrison magazines, and in it I wrote, so now the South and Midwest Gomer piles must be sought, so cripple some legs in a parking lot. And they had to get rid of Wallace. Nobody else had a motive to kill Wallace more than Richard Nixon. After he was shot, Charles Colson tried to send E. Howard Hunt to Arthur Bremer's apartment to plant left-wing stuff to make it look like McGovern, for some reason, would shoot Wallace. So that's a fact. There are other issues here, which I have to go through it. But I think one other thing, his brother, whom we haven't seen since he was 4, but his brother was arrested in some kind of weight scandal, and his lawyer was Ellis Rubin. And Ellis Rubin ends up being a lawyer for the Watergate burglars. Okay? And one of the guys connected to the RFK case, he was friends with Bremer's sister. And that's a little freaky, all that stuff. So I at least wanted to mention that. I mean, if I had time, I could take the time to give you all the statistics and the names and that. But I guess we'll just go to the, there's one little, I made a line on it so I could find it here. Okay. The Dorothy Hunt thing is kind of amazing. Dorothy Hunt was traveling all over the country, paying money to people to keep quiet. And some people were getting testy. They were upset with the interruption in payments, specifically some of the Watergate guys. And so she was on a plane on December 8th, 1972, going from Washington to Chicago. Apparently she had $10,000 in her briefcase. For the first time ever, and this is according to her son, whom I'm very friendly with, she bought a $250 airplane life insurance policy. They hadn't done that before. And she paid for the plane seat next to her to put the briefcase. Never treated the briefcase like a person. Didn't want to put that anywhere else. Okay? And the plane crashes. Okay. And some of the people in the back survived, but everybody up front was killed. She was with a couple of people. One of them was Michelle Clark. She was a newspaper writer for CBS, and she was looking into the whole Watergate from the ugly side of it. And so her boyfriend was a CIA operative and was helping her. And she was on the plane with a man named George Collins, who was a congressman from Chicago. They were all killed. She also had sensitive documents in that briefcase pertaining to Watergate. At any rate, the only way I can do this with any justice is to, I usually like to just talk, but I got to read this in order to get it right because it's important. The following facts make it exceedingly difficult to accept the conclusions that sabotage was not involved in the crash of Flight 553. It is known that 50 FBI agents arrived at the scene of the crash before the fire department, which had been alerted to the crash within 1 minute. Okay? Researcher Carl Oglesby, and I knew Carl, There is no obvious way such a large response of 50 agents within the hour could have been generated from a standing start as of the moment of the crash itself, and there are never 50 agents available at once without warning. It is tradition that FBI agents do not gather in offices waiting for calls, but stay in the field. Almost immediately after the crash, someone claiming to be from the government seized the flight recorder tapes from the control center at Midway. The flight data recorder, which keeps a continuous graph paper trace of everything on a plane's flight, including speed, altitude, pitch, angles, etc., stopped functioning 14 minutes before the crash. The cockpit voice recorder was found contaminated with hydraulic oil, and the last 8 minutes were essentially meaningless for investigative purposes. Furthermore, the officials of the National Transportation Safety Board did not recover these items from the plane, and it is unknown who did. Both altimeters, and there's one for the pilot and one for the co-pilot, which locate the plane's distance above sea level, appear to have malfunctioned at the same time. Sherman Skolnick, I met him once, what a wild character he was. St. John Hunt loves that man. He's gone now, but he had polio. He was in a wheelchair. I met him, and he was at our conference, Robert, in 1975 at BU. Sherman Skolnick also asserted that 11 witnesses claimed that Flight 533 exhibited no lights as it crashed to the ground. Okay. St. John Hunt has written a book about his father and a book about his mother, and he said that the pilot, when the White House, had high counts of cyanide, 4 times more than could be produced by post-crash fires. And Carl Olsbury did a whole statistical analysis about it. There's about 12 people up front, and they all had high levels of cyanide in them. So what the hell's that all about? Okay, and then here's the kicker. One day, to save time, Eagle Crow gave $5,000 to Gordon Liddy to break into the psychiatrist's office of Daniel Ellsberg, okay? So he was found guilty of lying about that business, Eagle Crow. The day, Leon Jaworski, prosecuted him, and he could give him a 10-year sentence. But in his heart, he believed that Eagle Crow was a reformed man and was sorry for his sins. And the guy ended up getting 4 months. Let's take a little look at Eagle Crow here. The day after the plane crash, Nixon makes him Undersecretary of the Department of Transportation, and he immediately starts telling the National Safety Board, hurry up with your reports, and threaten disciplinary action on anyone that was slow. Okay? All right. And then, in Peter Dale Scott's book with Henri Kruger about the heroin coup, Eagle Crow, according to them, is a central figure in helping Nixon and the drug trafficking in Laos and Burma. So he really was sorry for his sins. My Lord. That gives you an idea where Jaworski's at. Okay, Alexander Butterfield, 10 days after the crash, is appointed by Nixon to head the FAA, and he starts pressuring people. He also hires Dwight Chapin in January, which is like a month later, to become the director of marketing planning at United Airlines, and then he's involved in the pushing the national. So 3 members of the Nixon administration within a month are trying to stop any investigation into the Dorothy plane crash. There's more, but to save time, I'll probably just move along here. I think you get the idea. And then just to give an idea of the things that Jaworski didn't investigate, and I suppose I just better, this is a collection of, there's all kinds of writers. There's Anthony Summers, Don Folsom, Lamar Waldron, a whole bunch of them. And here are the things that Howard Hughes's contributions illegally to the Nixon campaign, the ITT finance scandal, the extortion of millions of dollars from the dairy industry, Nixon's extensive ties to mafia bosses with deep financial links to B.B. Rebozo, arguably Nixon's best friend, his authorizing the CIA mafia plots to kill Castro, his sabotaging LBJ's Paris peace talks, his suggestions to kill Aristotle Onassis and journalist Jack Anderson, his hiding of illegal funds provided by the Greek military junta, his secret payouts to political candidates, his using the IRS to investigate his enemies, his various plots to destroy Ted Kennedy's career, his spying on presidential candidate George McGovern, his laundering of Robert Vesco's money through a casino, his illegal aid from corporations via channeled companies through foreign companies and Swiss banks, and his involvement in various money scams with the Teamsters. All of that should have been investigated by the special prosecutor, and he left. And not only that, as I was talking to a number of people who were asking me, well, who broke into the Watergate building? Who was behind the Watergate burglars? And I think it's safe to say it's all speculation. It's never been proven. Even Jaworski admits Nixon did not break it. He's guilty of the cover-up. He screwed himself with his own tapes. Even Jaworski said if he had burned the tapes, I wouldn't have been able to get him. They got him on the tapes. He covered up. Dean helped him along. But they never, he said he's got nothing, even Nixon said, why the hell would we bug that place? He thought it was a prank. I don't know if that's why he didn't take it seriously. And today, there's never really been an official who the hell did it. Now, I think you have to look at the Pentagon. You have to look at military intelligence people. You have to look at the CIA and or somewhere along there. But it's never been, been defined. Isn't that part of the job of the special prosecutor? You're investigating the Watergate break-in, but you're not going to find out who did it? You're just going to nail the guy at the end who tried to cover it up? Okay. All that stuff should have been done, and it wasn't done. All right, and let me find Mr. Segretti for you, Casey. I talked about Agnew, bringing little George into it. Figures he'd get in there somehow, huh? Jeez, should have stuck with the broccoli. Okay. And there's some big crooks here. He let Eagle Crow go. Richard Kleindienst is involved in all kinds of criminal activities. He let him off. Herbert Kalmbach, his lawyer. That's the sad one. Kalmbach's involved in a multitude of criminal acts, right? He's guilty in all of them. And he gets like 4 months. And in his book about Watergate, I mean, this is bad. Jaworski basically says he's mentally ill. He's a poo of little brain. I mean, there's quotes in here about, he's not playing with a full deck. And one of the last prosecutor for the Watergate case, he said there are things in Jaworski's Watergate book that just shouldn't be in the public domain. They're private things. I think that was one of them. I mean, the Kleindienst isn't going to say anything because he got off. But, I mean, he's one of the ones involved in the $10 million San Clemente estate business. Finally, Segretti. Now, Segretti gets 4 months. They charge him with some illegal campaign literature. That's a hell of an understatement and euphemism, huh? And let me read this to you. Okay. Segretti, whose dirty trick activities were truly despicable and outrageous. He used fake Senator Ed Muskie stationery to accuse Henry Scoop Jackson of homosexuality, and he also charged Herbert Humphrey with homosexuality, and simultaneously claiming he had fathered an illegitimate child with a 17-year-old girl. Jackson finished third in the Florida primary and dropped out of the presidential race soon after. Signs supposedly financed by a fictitious group, Mothers Backing Muskie Committee, were disseminated in Florida because they didn't want busing down there, saying Muskie backed busing in that state. There was a Harris poll denigrating Ted Kennedy, which was sent to members of Congress on Muskie stationery, and a report that Hubert Humphrey had been arrested for drunk driving in '67 and was also a homosexual. A New Hampshire primary held in February '72 included phone calls to New Hampshire voters from a non-existent Harlem for Muskie committee, encouraging, and the people speaking had black accents, encouraging full justice for blacks. Okay? There was a Muskie stationery calling Shirley Chisholm mentally unstable, having been institutionalized. White mice with ribbons on their tails saying Muskie is a rat fink have been dropped off at a Muskie conference, and at a Muskie fundraiser, here it is, at Washington's Hilton for 1,300 guests, 200 pizzas, and magicians from the Virgin Islands, and ambassadors from foreign countries all showed up uninvited by dirty tricksters. One more should suffice. Segretti and his men distributed printed cards at a George Wallace rally that read on one side, "If you liked Hitler, you'll love Wallace," and on the other side it said, "Vote Muskie." And he tried to treat it like, oh, it was just chicken shit, minor stuff. All those people were destroyed. Their presidential candidates were destroyed. So it wasn't. And he got 4 months. Thank you, Leon. And Leon will say, oh, it was the judges who gave them the sentences. Yeah, but he's making the charges, and he's making recommendations. The only one who got screwed, really, was Liddy. 4.5 years. And I was talking to ST about it. He was the badass who told the truth. And even the Watergate experts who have dealt with all of them say, the only one that really was honest amongst crooks was Liddy. I got his address once and wrote to him, but I was a nobody. He wouldn't answer me. But and he's the one that accuses the call girl ring primarily. He's the one that got into court suits with John Dean, and the implication was Liddy was basically saying we were trying to get a prostitutes list, and he was accusing John Dean's future wife of being a prostitute, and that's where the whole war gets going. In fact, I think Kolodny had to settle out of court in a pay thing, right? Okay. Anyway, and what else do I want to do here? And one last thing about it, and then I'll try to do a little Jack Ruby stuff. I won't go into it here, but Leon Jaworski was a member of on the board of directors of the M.D. Anderson Fund, which was a CIA front. And and one of the members of the M.D. Anderson, just as he became special prosecutor, the director at the time said that we were doing money laundering with the CIA for another company, the Jurists for Jurists, and that was a CIA front as well. So we should throw that all into the mix for everything else that little Leon was doing. He was also friendly with Homer Thornberry, and that's the judge that at the last minute gets appointed to hear the Richard case, Nagel case, and he gives him a 10-year sentence. Through appeals, he gets out. He gets out from under all that. But he's pals with him, and so it's just endless, just absolutely endless. What a scumbag. Okay, so that I think does a better job of what I didn't finish last night. All right, so let me throw this away. Are there any questions about that before I move on to some little Ruby stuff? Or did I do a satisfactory enough job on that? Okay. Now, there are Kennedy researchers here who know quite a bit about this, but I got the wrong envelope. Let's see here. Just a couple of other preliminaries. Some of you might not know this. This is kind of obscure. I got two little obscure things here that I want to go through. Are you ready? This is a quote. I hate war, and if the day comes when my vote must be cast to send your boy to the trenches, that day I will leave this Senate seat to go with him. Lyndon Baines Johnson, 1941. Okay. This is the Christmas after the assassination, December 1963. Lyndon Johnson sent out a Christmas card to his friends. Quote, I assume it was a picture of deers being shot. Greetings from deer country of Texas. We hope your holiday season will be more delectable because of our hunting season. In Texas, from November on, the hills are alive with the sound of hunters. Here is the result killed this year by our trusty rifles on the LBJ Ranch. Do you believe that? Okay. Now that deserves silence. That does. All right. What else we got here? I could, I've got them spaced out throughout this 60-page article that I've written for Garrison Magazine. And honestly, if you're interested in the assassination, if you're interested in Watergate or any other political issues, not everybody agrees. You may not agree with everything in there. But the man's busting his butt day in and day out, putting out Garrison Magazine. and it's been 9 issues now, and I wasn't in the first one, which was more like a little magazine, but I've got something in the next 8, and they aren't magazines. It's a big mother book. Remember when you were a kid and you had those geography books that weighed a ton? That's what it's like, okay? And there's really good stuff in there. And there's some of the recent ones have had experts, the Watergate people especially. He's going to put out a Watergate issue next, and this Jaworski article's in there. I highly recommend that you can Google Garrison Magazine and find Lulu, whatever the hell that means, and buy the thing. Anyway, I could go through what I've got here, but I think I kind of made a little summary here. These are quotes from Jack Ruby in various places. Now, some of you know them. In fact, Gary quoted one yesterday. But let me just kind of whip through these here. And then I'll try to jump around and see what I can get here. On November 21st, he was with 5 Dallas police officers and 2 district attorneys in the Dallas Records Building, and he said to them, "You probably don't know me now, but you will." Okay? That's the day before. This was hidden for 40 years, and thanks to Gary, we were able to put this in the bed. This was classified for 40 years. Now, there were little bits and pieces of it before that, but would you like to watch the fireworks? And Jack Ruby has said that to a Robert Vanderslice in the loan office of R.D. Matthews on November 22nd. In other words, the morning before the assassination, Jack Ruby, and the problem was that there were 2 sources. And one source was a tax government thing. And it said that this Vanderslice had said that Ruby had called him and said, "Come with me to watch the fireworks." But there was another source that said Ruby went to R.D. Matthews' office and Vanderslice was there. Now, Vanderslice was a low-level crook. R.D. Matthews is maybe in the top 3 guys of the mafia in Dallas. In fact, a cop I knew, I was thinking of contacting Matthews. He said, "Don't do it, man. The guy is deadly." I said, "Okay." I was knocking on the doors again, right? And so I had to find out which story was true. And Gary knew Vanderslice, talked to him in person. And the story is, Ruby is in R.D. Matthews' office. He must have thought Vanderslice was okay because he was in the crook's office. And Ruby said, let's go see the fireworks. And the story has always been that Vanderslice and Ruby went down to Dealey Plaza and watched the assassination. But we find out is Matthews was with them. You're bringing in one of the major mafia guys, and I got the whole history of Matthews here that we don't have time for. But the one thing I will tell you is he was really close to Charlie Harrelson. All right? And I corresponded with Charles Harrelson. And I corresponded with his cellmate. He let me deal with his cellmate for years. And if I was wrong, he denies that he had anything to do with it eventually. When he was arrested for killing the federal judge, and I'm not sure he killed the federal judge, but he said he killed Kennedy. Okay, then he denied it later. But why is he letting me deal with his cellmate if I'm wrong about the stuff I'm sending him? He even let me correspond with his last wife. So it's very, very interesting stuff. At any rate, R.D. Matthews in Dealey Plaza, that is a hell of a thing. Let's go on here. In all the history of the United States, never has a president been elected that has the background of Johnson. Believe me, compared to him, I am a saint. Can you imagine if that was in the newspapers, even today? How many Americans, you and I know it, but how many Americans know that? The average person. As soon as you get out, you must read Texas Looks at Lyndon, and it may open your eyes to a lot of things. This man is a Nazi in the worst order. Jerry Bruno, John Kennedy's advance man, considered Johnson a Nazi. Lyndon Johnson, when he was in college, said, "We Hitlerized the place." He even called himself a Nazi. Billy Solestes told me, "Guy was a Nazi. He was an animal," Billy would say to me. Okay? To the Warren Commission, a whole new form of government is going to take over our country, and I know I won't live to see you another time. I love this one. To the Warren Commission, I am as innocent regarding any conspiracy as any of you gentlemen in the room. Damn. Damn. Okay. He was in a hallway during one of his trials. He said, complete conspiracy and the assassination too. If you knew the facts, you would be amazed. If Adlai Stevenson had been vice president, there would have been no assassination. The man's trying to snitch. And then I won't read the one that he read last night about other high, this was done by people in high places, and are they still in office? And he says, yes. One of the kickers is when Kennedy's killed, and you can Google it and go to YouTube, just as Oswald comes out the door, there's a honk, and then just as he reaches the middle, honk, a little one, and Ruby runs out and shoots him. And one of the letters he smuggled out of jail, Jack Ruby said, if you ever hear a lot of horn honking, it will be for me. They will want my blood. So that's equating the kiss on the cheek to the horn honk, okay? Now, Gary Mack, one of them, used to tell me, oh, it's a garage ad. There were horn honks all the time. So I couldn't check that out then, but now with the computer, I went on and I found a video of they're waiting for this thing to happen, and there are people, and I think one car goes by. I think I hear one horn like 20 minutes before the thing, and then you get honk, honk. Gary's full of shit, okay? Phil Nelson, a relative newcomer to this case, and he's trying to learn about, and you tried to be nice about it. You were being diplomatic down in Dallas. I don't want to speak ill of the dead, and the hell with that. And Phil Nelson says to me, Ed, who knows more about the Kennedy assassination than anyone in the world? I said, that's easy, Gary Mack. Yeah, he's one of them. I said, yeah, he knows everything they know and everything we know. I mean, and I dealt with Gary like for years. He was my friend. And then he did this 180-degree turn. And Gus Russo, wherever Mal is, he was my friend. I dealt with him for years. And all of a sudden, Castro. And I'm like, what? And then you start to say, oh my God, did they just change? Or were they always one of them and they were wearing the old sheep's clothing? And we're talking about betrayal. And that's something, we've all been betrayed. I've been betrayed through the years. And that's where Dante's Inferno, the lowest hole in hell, is for betrayers. Yeah? Okay, let's see. What else should I do here? Where am I on time, Mr. Denton?
15 minutes.
I got 15 minutes.
12:30, we got to lock her down. We got food coming.
Okay. The most important, I think, in my opinion, and I should try to find it exactly. Here it is. One of Ruby's letters is very important. He wrote, I think it was to Joe, and I believe that's Joe Cody, who was one of his friends. I wrote to Cody once. He wrote back a rather cryptic letter. But at any rate, Ruby wrote, yeah, it is Joe. Be careful, Joe, as to how you check on anything, and also what I'm telling you here, and also who you can trust. Stay away from P.T. Dean. He's in the conspiracy. Now, that was a police officer named Patrick Dean, okay? And Patrick Dean was in charge of security, and even the House Select Committee were very suspicious of him, but they were suspicious of J. Eric Johnson and Bill Moyers and didn't do anything about it, and they didn't do anything about Patrick Dean. Patrick Dean, in the early 60s, took a lie detector test. He was allowed to write his own questions, and he failed the thing. So they were very suspicious of him. I can go on in great details here. The key thing is, he's a member of the, he's a Dallas police officer, but he's very close to Joe Civello, who's right there with Campisi and R.D. Matthews running the mob. And I can go on for pages, but again, the thing is that Ruby befriended him, used to let him visit the jail, signed his copy of the warrant report, gave it to Dean, your buddy, Jack. I think he's trying to play both ends off the middle. Please don't kill me. The This one Warren Commission lawyer, Bert Griffin, he and Leon Hubert seem to be the two fairly honest ones, although they still say Oswald did it today, or at least Griffin does. But Griffin and Hubert wrote this whole thing about all of this Ruby Mafia stuff, and the Warren Commission didn't want to have anything to do with it. Eventually, Hubert just quit. But Griffin believed that Dean was lying. He did not believe that Ruby came in by the ramp, okay? And he fought like hell. And Patrick Dean was so upset with Bert Griffin, he contacted Henry Wade, the district attorney. Henry Wade called Lyndon Johnson, and they sent Bert Griffin out of Dallas. Imagine that? And then Dean went to the press and said, got rid of that asshole, didn't they? So it kind of gives you an idea of scariness of all of this. Okay, what else did I mention? I did that. A couple people have mentioned the bullet business, Commission Exhibit 399, but I don't think it was clarified properly. He's no longer with us, but a man named John Hunt deserves a lot of credit here. John Hunt. Anyway, the official story is the bullet is found on a stretcher, and Darrell Tomlinson finds it, and he gives it to the security guy at the hospital, O.P. Wright, and O.P. Wright gives it to a Secret Service agent named Richard Johnson, and nobody wanted that bullet. He had a hell of a time finding some official to get the hell away from me. I don't want that. But Richard Johnson took it, and Johnson should have put his initials on it, and he didn't. So now you have a problem of chain of transfer, because in a court of law, I debated Bugliosi about that. Bugliosi debated Mark Lane one night in a college, and it was kind of a stalemate. And then he took me on down in the groups. I wiped the floor with him because I kept pointing out. He goes, "Oh, that happens with evidence all the time." I said, "Not the assassination of the president, you turkey." So there was only like 25 people, but I was beating him. I was probably 28 years old. I don't know. Anyway, from there it went to Rowley, the Secret Service chief. He didn't put his initials on it. Then he gave it to an FBI agent named Elmer Todd. I almost always say Elmer Fudd. That's really hard to say, Elmer Todd, Todd puts his initials on it. He gives it to the head of ballistics, Robert Frazier, who's a scumbag in every one of these cases, okay? Robert Frazier said he put his initials on it. Cortland Cunningham is with him. Charles Killian is with him. The three of them put their initials on it. So you got 4 FBI agents who initial a bullet. John Hunt goes down to the National Archives, takes high-resolution photographs. Frazier's initials are on it. Killian's initials are on it. Cunningham's initials are on it. Todd's aren't on it. It's not the same bullet. It's bullshit. 399 is a fake. Absolute fake. And there's a guy named Barry Crush who did the same thing with the shells. Frazier said he put his initials on the 3 shells. His initials are not on it. It's bullshit. They're fake. Okay? And finally, one more little thing here that I think is important, and I'll try to make sense out of this. Several years ago, a neighbor of Sam Kinney, a Secret Service agent, went public. Sam said, "Tell the story, but not until I'm dead." Well, the guy waited until Sam was dead and his wife was dead. And he went on radio and he said, Sam Kinney said, shot came from the right front. He thought it was disgusting, all that blood in the car, so he wiped it down. He washed it with a bucket of water, which is obviously insane to be doing. But he also said that he found a bullet in the limo and a piece of skull, like a piece of a flower pot. And he put them on a stretcher. Now, whether that's got anything to do with the bullet on the stretcher or not, who the hell knows? But a piece of skull and a bullet. And again, it's a neighbor telling the story, and he doesn't have proof, and there's no tape recording, no writing down. And then Sam Kinney had told Vince Palomaro, the Secret Service expert, that he found a piece of skull. Didn't mention a bullet to Palomaro, and that he gave that piece of skull to a man named Tommy Mills, who was a Navy guy working for Admiral George Berkeley, the physician, Kennedy's physician. Okay, so we got 2 stories here. We got a bullet in the skull from the limo going on a stretcher, and we have a piece of skull going to somebody named Tommy Mills. Then there's another story that came out in a different article, and I think I'm the only one who saw the two of them belong together. But a Dr. James Young was at the autopsy, and he has nothing but praise for Humes, Boswell, and Fink, okay? But he said that Hume said, you know, we're missing pieces of the skull, so why don't you send a couple of military guys over to the limo, see if you can find anything. So 2 guys go over, and they find 3 pieces of skull in the limo, and a bullet, a deformed brass slug. And they bring them back to the autopsy. Well, those have never shown up as far as I know. Well, James Young, who's a big supporter of, you know, Oswald, I don't know if he's saying Oswald did alone, but he just thinks that the autopsy's okay, so I guess he's supporting the lone assassin thing. But this bothers him because there doesn't seem to be any record of this other slug. So, being the legitimate character he is, he writes a letter to Gerald Ford. And Gerald Ford says, no, I don't know anything about that. But if you're really interested in this case, you should read a book by David Bellin and another one by Gerald Posner, and you'll get the good story. There's Jerry doing his thing. And then he said, oh, hell, maybe I should try again. And so he wrote to our inspector. Inspector said, well, I'll get back to you. Send me the stuff. I'll get back to you, see what I can do. Well, that was the end of that. Okay, which we all figured would be the end of it. But what I noticed is that the skull that Palomaro was told that Kinney gave to Tommy Mills, and one of the 2 guys that went over and found the 3 skull pieces in the slug was Tommy Mills. It's the same guy in 2 contradictory stories. So the question would be, well, let's talk to Tommy Mills. Okay? Tommy Mills backs Dr. James Young's story. We found 3 skull pieces and a spent slug in the limo. And then other researchers started to contact Mills. Obviously, this is getting heavy. And he starts getting defensive and backing off. And one of them found out what he did after, I won't give you the specifics, but one of them found out what he did after he left the military. First of all, he became some bigwig in the Navy, like top brass thing, you know, high, you know, all the ribbons. And then he retired, and he went to work on the Lyndon Johnson Ranch. He went to work for Lyndon Johnson. Booga booga. I think the only other thing I would mention is at the, and I could try to find it exactly. Let me, if I maybe since I got maybe a minute here, I can find it. But basically, I can paraphrase it. You know, Ruby is saying, well, maybe I shouldn't be talking. You know, maybe I shouldn't be saying what I'm saying. And Earl Warren says to him, well, if you think your life is being threatened, you can stop anytime you want, Jack, which is a veiled threat in and of itself. So even Earl Warren is saying, yeah, maybe it's a good idea to not tell us anymore. You know, of course, he's begging. 8 times he begs them, take me back to Washington. I can tell you more. And then Ford says, you think you could tell us more if we went back to Washington? You know, and I'm supposing, you dipshit, that's what I just said 8 times. You know, at any rate, I've done the best I can under the conditions, so I think I'll stop right there. Thank you very much. If there are any questions, I'll be glad to try to answer them.
Amazing. You actually left 5 minutes of questions. Any questions for Ed Tatro?
Don't all answer it at once.
You said Mills worked for,
What's that?
you said Mills then went to work for LBJ?
Tommy Mills worked at the LBJ Ranch after he retired.
And Gary just said that, what, Mike Howard went to work for LBJ. He was with you when he died.
Who's he saying?
Mike Howard?
Oh, I know that, yeah.
Howard.
And that's why I mentioned yesterday that Mike Howard was one of the people in control of Marina and Margarita at the Inn of the Six Flags. And by the way, the Inn of the Six Flags is basically owned by Bedford Wynn and Clint Murchison. And if Bobby Baker, a trial had been conducted properly and John Kennedy hadn't been killed, Bedford Wynn and Clint Murchison might very well have gone to jail with Lyndon Johnson. So all of that ties in. That's why, as Gary and I know quite well, all important roads in one way or another will lead to Texas. I wrote it. There's a book by Richard Bartholomew called The Deep State in the Heart of Texas. And he wrote essays way ahead of everybody else, way ahead of his time, about D.H. Byrd and all these Texas people. And when he finally decided to put all his essays in one little paperback, he asked me to write the foreword. And I wrote a 10-page foreword. And what I did was I wrote 10 pages of conspiratorial acts that the CIA had nothing to do with. I'm not exonerating the CIA. I'm not belittling the stuff that you're doing. I'm just saying, as he put in his speech, it was a collaborative effort on the part of the most powerful people in the world. To me, the CIA is middle management. DeBruce is an important character, but he's not running the show. You got Alan Dulles, you got Council on Foreign Affairs, you got bankers, you got Federal Reserve, you got Joint Chiefs of Staff, you got Dulles, McCloy, and people like that. Let's not lose sight of perspectives on things. And so almost every paragraph begins with, the CIA did not do this, and the CIA did not do that. I dealt with the head chemist of the FBI, and in the 90s, a bullet was found in Dealey Plaza, and it was brought to his department in Washington, and there was a speck of blue paint on it that came from Kennedy's limo. And he said to me in person, you got to find the documentation on that. And he became a whistleblower because he found that the FBI was tainting all kinds of cases, putting innocent people in jail, putting guilty people free. And he went public with everything he had been documenting for 15 years. And when he met me, and they ended up letting him, they settled out of court. They gave him $1.3 million and his retirement for the rest of the next 15 years, he was only in his 40s, to shut him up. He's been getting people out of jail that were falsely incriminated, okay? And I told him about the paper bag story. And the paper bag, there were two documents. One says that the paper bag was made from paper in the Texas School Book Depository, and the other one says it wasn't. And what they did is they made up two scenarios, and they forgot to get rid of one of them. They're fake. So these people that want to trust all these documents in the archives, good luck to you. And I wrote a whole article about it. Jack White was involved with that. And I wrote this whole article about all this, a blueprint for revised documents. And I told this Whitehurst, he said, do you have any idea what I'm talking about? I said, and I started telling him about the paper bag. And he looked at me and said, what you're telling me is the FBI was doing this shit 15 years before I got there. I said, yes, sir. And he goes, I'll be damned. Anyway.
Any other questions? Well, thank you very much. Let me just make a couple announcements. Let's give Ed a big hand here, okay? So we're going to have food here in a minute. Speaking of food, my wife, Debbie Denton, over there, and my sister-in-law, Chris Denton, did an amazing job last night for speakers. You guys give them a hand. And by the way, my wife, Debbie, is one of the nicest people in Olney. Feel that?
He knew where I was going. He knew where I was going. He said that a couple of years. He said, my wife is the nicest person in Olney. And then he said, but it's a small town. And I said, you just blew it, man.